In his intriguing book, SuperSense, psychologist Bruce M. Hood delves into the world of supernatural beliefs and why they are so ubiquitous across cultures. From lucky charms to ghosts to conspiracy theories, people everywhere believe in things that defy rational explanation. Hood argues that this is not simply a product of ignorance or indoctrination, but rather a direct result of how the human mind has evolved to work. We are all natural-born superstitious thinkers, with brains that are highly attuned to finding patterns, intentions, and hidden meanings in the world around us. This supersense, as Hood calls it, is a fundamental part of our cognitive machinery. It's not a special psychic power reserved for the paranormal-minded, but a basic feature of how we all make sense of reality. Even the most hardcore skeptic or scientist can't help but feel a twinge of supernatural sentiment from time to time. The question is not whether we have a supersense, but how much we let it guide our beliefs and behaviours. Drawing on a wealth of research from developmental psychology, anthropology, neuroscience, and other fields, Hood builds a compelling case that the roots of supernatural thinking lie deep in our mental architecture. From a very young age, children show signs of intuitive dualism, essentialism, and teleology, the building blocks of spiritual belief. They naturally assume that mental states are separate from physical bodies, that living things have an intrinsic essence that makes them what they are, and that the world is designed for a purpose. These implicit beliefs shape how they understand death, identity, causality, and many other fundamental aspects of existence. Far from being childish misconceptions, these intuitions continue to colour our thinking throughout life. Hood provides plenty of striking examples of how even smart, educated adults frequently fall back on supernatural explanations, especially when confronted with uncanny or emotionally charged situations. We may not literally believe in magic, but we often act as if thoughts can influence reality, or as if certain objects and places are imbued with spiritual power. For instance, in one famous study, people were asked whether they would wear a sweater that had belonged to a serial killer. The sweater had been thoroughly cleaned and was identical to a normal sweater, but participants still balked at the idea. At an intuitive level, they couldn't shake the sense that the murderer's evil essence had somehow contaminated the clothing. This kind of thinking is classic supersense, the belief that moral qualities can rub off on objects, almost like an invisible substance. Similarly, most of us have felt an eerie sense of significance when a loved one's name comes up unexpectedly, or a lucky coincidence occurs. We may not really believe the universe is sending us signs, but the feeling is hard to shake. As much as we try to be rational, there's a part of us that suspects events are more than just random happenstance. The supersense is always lurking in the background, ready to jump to conclusions and see meaning in the meaningless. So where does this powerful intuition come from? Hood argues it emerges naturally as a byproduct of normal cognitive development. From infancy onward, our minds are busy trying to construct coherent models of how the world works, what Hood calls intuitive theories. These aren't scientific theories, but more like implicit assumptions and expectations about the regularities of nature. For example, babies quickly learn that physical objects are solid, stable, and persist over time. They're surprised if a ball seems to pass through a wall or disappear into thin air. This rudimentary physical understanding sets up a contrast with their experience of the mental world. Thoughts, dreams, emotions, and other mental states seem ephemeral and observer-dependent. They don't act like ordinary objects. This lays the groundwork for mind-body dualism, the common-sense notion that the self is something separate from the body. You can see this belief in action whenever a young child talks about a dead relative being in heaven or watching over them. For kids, it seems completely natural that Grandma's soul has gone on to another realm, even though her body is in the ground. No one has to teach them this. The idea of an immortal spirit is highly intuitive given the dissociations between mental experience and physical reality. A similar story plays out in how we think about living things. From a young age, children grasp that plants and animals behave in goal-directed ways distinct from inanimate objects. An animal moves on its own, pursues food, tries to avoid danger. These behaviors are driven by internal states like hunger, fear, and desire. The animal is an intentional agent with a mind of its own, whereas a rock is merely a passive object. But what exactly is it that gives living things their special qualities? To answer this, children posit an invisible essence, a vital force or spirit that animates the body. Ask a 5-year-old why a dog wags its tail and they're likely to say something like, because it's happy or because it wants to play. There's no need to refer to nerves, muscles, or motor programs. The essence of dogness takes care of the details. This essentialist intuition pops up again and again in supernatural beliefs. Think of fantasy stories where characters drink magic potions to change their abilities, or legends about sacred objects imbued with divine powers. These ideas resonate with us because they fit our natural assumption that unseen essences determine the fundamental properties of things. A tiger has its tiger essence, a person has their unique soul, a place has its special energy. Surface appearances can change, but the inner nature endures. Another key ingredient of our supersense is the drive to find purpose and intention in the world. For our ancestors, being able to quickly read the minds of other people and predict their goals was a crucial survival skill. Is this person a friend or foe? Why are they acting that way? What will they do next? Over evolutionary time, our brains developed specialized machinery for answering these questions, fueled by a rich understanding of mental states. But this same social intelligence can lead us to see minds where none exist. A rustle in the bushes could be a tiger or just the wind. Far better to err on the side of caution and assume intentional agency. This intentional stance, as the philosopher Daniel Dennett calls it, is our default way of making sense of events. From an early age, children ascribe goals and desires not only to people and animals, but also plants, artifacts, and natural phenomena. Ask a young child why rocks are pointy, and they're likely to say so animals won't sit on them, or so that people can scratch their backs. Everything is assumed to exist for a reason. The idea that something might be an accident or a byproduct just doesn't come naturally. Of course, we eventually learn that not everything is designed, but the intuition never really goes away. Even adults can't help slipping into teleological reasoning from time to time. Think of how often we talk about Mother Nature, as if the natural world were a wise and benevolent persona. Or consider the popularity of conspiracy theories, which assume that major events like 9/11 or the moon landing must be the result of hidden agencies with secret agendas. The intentional stance is so deeply ingrained that it's hard to resist seeing plots and plans behind the scenes. So our supersense is really the product of two deep-seated cognitive biases. On the one hand, we're natural-born dualists who pass the world into physical bodies and immaterial minds. On the other hand, we're relentless intention seekers who look for hidden meanings and purposes everywhere. Put these together and you have a recipe for supernatural thinking. Hood argues that it's these basic mental traits, not cultural indoctrination or ignorance of science, that are the real drivers of spiritual belief worldwide. Of course, this isn't to say that social learning and environmental factors play no role. Clearly, the specific content of people's supernatural beliefs, whether they worship ancestors or pray to Zeus, depends heavily on the surrounding culture. And there's no doubt that participating in religious institutions can reinforce and enhance our natural spiritual leanings. Children growing up in devout households are more likely to report paranormal experiences and endorse creationism than those from more secular backgrounds. But Hood stresses that culture and education can only build on the foundations laid down by our cognitive architecture. No amount of scientific instruction can eliminate the supersense entirely, because it's not a matter of ignorance or faulty logic. It's a built-in feature of our mental operating system, arising from some of the very traits that make us so intelligent and adaptable. In fact, Hood suggests that the capacity for supernatural thinking may have been positively selected for over the course of human evolution. As social creatures, we depend heavily on our ability to cooperate with others and form cohesive groups. Shared beliefs in gods, karma, and cosmic justice help bind people together and motivate them to behave pro-socially. Individuals who are prone to see higher meanings in events may be better able to cope with hardship and uncertainty. And a tendency to infer unseen causes can spur curiosity and creativity, leading to new insights and innovations. So while supernatural thinking can sometimes lead us astray, promoting superstition, conspiracy theories, and pseudoscience, it may also serve important adaptive functions. The supersense is not a bug, but a feature of our evolved minds. Trying to eradicate it entirely would be futile and possibly even counterproductive. The challenge is to harness its power while keeping its excesses in check. This is easier said than done, of course. As Hood vividly demonstrates, even highly educated, scientifically literate people often struggle to override their intuitive beliefs. In one study, college students were primed with either an imaginary spell or a simple math problem before taking a memory test. Those exposed to the spell actually performed worse on the test, even though they knew it was just make-believe. At some level, they couldn't shake the feeling that the magical words had real effects. In another experiment, self-proclaimed atheists showed physical signs of stress when asked to desecrate holy books or blaspheme against God. They may not have consciously believed in divine retribution, but their bodies still reacted as if they were doing something dangerous. Such is the grip of the supersense on our minds and behaviours. So what are we to make of all this? Hood doesn't offer any easy answers, but he does suggest some general guidelines for navigating the murky waters of supernatural thinking. First and foremost, we need to cultivate a healthy dose of skepticism and critical thinking. Just because an idea feels intuitively right doesn't mean it is right. We have to be willing to question our assumptions and follow the evidence wherever it leads. At the same time, we shouldn't be too quick to dismiss the power of intuition altogether. As Hood points out, many of our most important decisions in life, who to marry, what career to pursue, whether to have children, are driven more by gut feelings than rational deliberation. And there's growing evidence that unconscious processing can sometimes lead to better outcomes than conscious reasoning, especially in complex, unpredictable domains. The key is to strike a balance between skepticism and openness, logic and intuition, head and heart. We need the rigors of science to keep our supersense in check, but we also need the creativity and sense of meaning that supernatural thinking provides. As the anthropologist Clifford Geertz once said, "Man is an animal suspended in webs of significance he himself has spun." The supersense is part of what makes us uniquely human, for better and for worse. Hood suggests that one way to find this balance is to cultivate a sense of awe towards the natural world. By marvelling at the wonders of the cosmos revealed by science, the vastness of space, the intricacy of the brain, the beauty of mathematics, we can satisfy our hunger for transcendence without resorting to supernatural explanations. We can learn to see the magic in the mundane and the extraordinary in the ordinary. Another key is to recognize the social and psychological functions that supernatural beliefs serve, even if we don't accept them as literally true. Rituals, origin stories, and beliefs in higher powers create a sense of order and meaning that science alone cannot provide. They remind us that we are part of something larger than ourselves and bind us together in the face of adversity. There is wisdom in this, even if the specific content of the beliefs is doubtful. Ultimately, the goal should not be to eradicate supernatural thinking, but to harness its power while minimizing its pitfalls. We can learn to appreciate the insights of religion and spirituality without accepting their truth claims. We can enjoy the thrill of ghost stories and fantasy fiction while remembering that they are just stories. And we can cultivate a sense of humility and wonder towards the grand mysteries of existence without falling prey to superstition or dogma. In the end, perhaps the greatest value of Hood's book is that it helps us understand ourselves better. By shining a light on the quirks and biases of our own minds, it allows us to approach the world with more clarity and compassion. We are all natural-born believers, for good and for ill. The best we can do is to embrace our cognitive heritage while also striving to transcend its limitations. It's a lifelong journey, but one well worth undertaking.